Everybody, welcome to what should be the last screencast of the year. We're talking about Unit 7, and that unit focuses on this idea of forming a more perfect union. So we'll be able to see in a second what that actually means, but the question that I want to ask to you before we even get into any of the topics that we're going to be discussing is, how can something be more perfect? So please insert your thoughts below about how something can be more perfect. All right, so thank you for your responses. Basically, what this unit is going to be about is stated in the essential question in front of you. We are going to evaluate the efficacy of the amendment process in improving the American government. What does the word efficacy mean? Well, basically what this question is getting at is, does the amendment process work in improving the American government? Is it a good process? What are the merits of this amendment process? Does the amendment process speak for everybody? Is everybody equally represented? Does everyone have an equal voice in the amendment process? So that's going to be part of, or the main part of what we're talking about in Unit 7 in Civics and Government. Okay, so that's your essential question. That's what this entire unit is going to focus around, the amendment process. So here are some of the terms, or all of the terms, that you are going to be responsible for knowing. Citizenship, different types of citizenship, right, entitlement, amendment process, and Bill of Rights. Those are listed in your reader, and you'll be filling those in as we go. This is probably the smallest terms, or the fewest amount of terms that you've had to know in a unit so far. So keeping them straight is going to be fairly straightforward, but just know, as always, there will be a terms quiz coming up on these specific terms. All right, so let's get right into it. Citizenship 1. Citizenship 1, or Level 1, whatever you want to call it. Citizenship 1. These three terms, the different types of citizenship, actually come from a reading that you are going to get into in a few days, called The Concept of Citizenship by David Ricci. And Citizenship 1 is the basic level of citizenship. So David Ricci says that if you're in this category, that your citizenship is passive, and you're holding documentation. You're a citizen just because you were born in a certain place, not because you've made a choice to be born somewhere or to live somewhere or to become a citizen somewhere. Obviously, that was silly of me to say. You can't choose to be born somewhere. And if you can, please let me know. I'd be confused and shocked to find out that's a thing. Anyway, and if you're a Citizen 1, you obey the law, but you don't really take any role in creating it. And that should obviously say, but takes no role in creating it. So these are the people, like this picture says. This is a good representation of what a Citizen 1 is. Just kind of sitting there. You're a citizen because you were born somewhere. You don't really care about shaping the law. You're not actively trying to do anything to make your voice heard. It's just, okay, I was born here. I'm a citizen here. What's the rest of my life? Okay? Now, what about Citizenship 2? As we go on, you'll see that there are increasing levels of engagement, right? So Citizenship 2, you're participatory. You participate in forming and creating and running your government. So you participate. That can mean things like voting. As you see the picture on the right, a standard voting booth. This is what, at least where I go to the polls in Westchester, this is what the polls generally look like. And So you participate, you're civically engaged. What does that mean? If you're civically engaged? That's a great question that I'd like to get some responses to. So in the pop-up right here, why don't you please tell me what being civically engaged actually means? In addition to the things that you mentioned, which hopefully were things like attending town hall meetings, writing to your congressperson, writing to your governor, being aware of things that are happening in the government and in politics in general. You might run for office. Maybe, who knows? You might help somebody prepare for a campaign, getting involved. Okay, so again, we're up another level from that citizenship 1. It's just, okay, I'm a citizen, to citizenship 2, I'm going to vote, I'm going to be engaged in this topic, I'm going to make my voice heard. Citizenship 2, another big difference here is that if you're a citizen 2, you obey the laws and you help make them. So this can be things like petitioning government officials, showing up at town hall meetings, helping to craft legislation in some way. And that can mean voting, right? Like sometimes when you're at the polls, I know you guys don't have experience with this yet, but sometimes when you're at the polls, there are ballot initiatives, things that you can do that we've kind of covered earlier this year, where you can have a say in the law. Let's move to citizenship 3. Citizenship 3. This is the most, according to David Ricci, this is the most elevated status a citizen can have in the United States. It's a combination of law and virtue. So there is another element to this that's not just obeying the law, because citizen 3s think that, well, you also have to think about what's morally correct. Okay, if a law is in place that this person, that a citizen 3 does not believe is moral, citizen 3 might break that law. The protests that happened with Martin Luther King, that's Martin Luther King Jr., by the way, in the 50s and 60s, those protests were illegal. Martin Luther King Jr. got arrested for speaking out against segregation, for trying to advocate for better conditions and for equal rights, equal liberties for all citizens in the United States. Made a conscious choice to break the law because he did not believe, and others did not believe, that that law was just. And so citizen 3s, yeah, they do disobey laws if it's necessary to disobey. So in addition to doing everything that a citizen 2 does, there's another level where you're not just obeying a law or helping write it, but you can actively disobey that law if you don't believe that it should be a law. So at this point, I'd like to ask you, where would you classify most people in the United States? No right or wrong answer necessarily, but I'm curious about what your perceptions are at this point. Where do most people fall on this citizenship 1, 2, or 3 category? Where would you put most people? So respond to the poll below. Again, we have citizenship 1, which is passive, citizenship 2, participatory, and citizenship 3, you're morally enlightened. All right, you can kind of see the progression there, 1, 2, and 3, of the different types of citizens according to David Ricci. All right, so rights and entitlements. Rights and entitlements. Rights are yours just because you were born. It requires nothing from other people except respect. People just have to respect that you have these rights, right? These unalienable rights, according to founding documents of the United States. We have these things that no one can take away because I was born with it. The question to you is, does that represent positive or negative liberty? And going back to a previous unit, please respond to the question below. Now, entitlements, on the other hand, are yours because you're a citizen of a certain country. They're distributed by the government. So if you move somewhere, if you move to another country, your entitlements are going to be different because of your citizenship in that country. What you can and can't do is going to be different because of where you live. Because certain things, as a society, we kind of believe that are not yours by just being born, right? To choose a hot button topic, the Second Amendment in the United States entitles you the right to bear arms. But you don't have that same entitlement if you move to other countries, like the UK, like Australia, who have much stricter regulations on firearms. So that's an entitlement, something that we're given because we live in the United States, or because people live in the UK, because people live in Australia, have certain entitlements. Again, my question to you is, does this represent positive or negative liberties? Please respond to the question below. So this kind of gets to the crux of what this unit is about, and I've alluded to it. I may have said the word a few times, but we're going to be talking about amendments. Yes, there have been changes to the Constitution. Oh my gosh, changes to the Constitution. It didn't just stop when they ratified the Constitution in 1787. It didn't. Article 5. Article 5 is the article that is really, really short, that outlines the entire amendment process. It's one paragraph. But it is a monumentally important article of the Constitution. It enables us to change what the founding document of our country says. We can change it. Now, it's really hard to change. So, a question that I'll ask to you now is to think about the number 11,000. 11,000. What do you think the number 11,000 is? How do you think the number 11,000 factors into the amendment process? Respond to the question, respond to the discussion board. Let's see what you think 11,000 refers to. Okay, so in case you are not sure, 11,000, and I should say really 11,000 plus, 11,000 plus are the number of amendments that have been proposed in United States history. 11,000 in the last 200 and almost 40 years. 27 of them have been enacted. 27 out of 11,000 plus. To make that math even more impressive, the first 10, which we're going to get to in a second, were ratified in 1791 all at once. So that means that between 1787 and now, the Constitution has been totally amended 18 separate times out of 11,000 plus attempts. That is crazy. That is bonkers. This really speaks to, like I said, how hard this process is, how difficult this process is. So let's check out what the process actually looks like. So there are two separate ways that you can amend the Constitution. It can go through Congress. It can also go through state legislatures. The way on the bottom, if you just follow the National Convention and 3/4 of state conventions, that has never happened. The bottom way has never happened at all. More commonly, what we'll find is that if you look up here, an amendment's posed by 2/3 vote of each House of Congress, so the Senate and the House propose an amendment, it's voted on, then it gets moved to state legislatures, and 3/4 of state legislatures have to ratify it in order for it to become law. Like I said, this is a monumentally difficult process. We've seen this year how difficult it is for simple laws to get passed when you most of the time just need a simple majority. You need 2/3 of each house to start the amendment process. 2/3. So that's 67 senators, right? And a few hundred, someone can do the math on that, a few hundred representatives to even send it to the states. So this process is hard. Some have argued that it's too hard and that change hasn't happened fast enough to certain things because it's such a difficult process. And as we gain more states, then the numbers change, and as representatives change, the numbers change as well. So be on the lookout for anytime there's an election where, like every 2 years, all of the seats in the House of Representatives are up for vote. That might play a role in whether or not amendments are passed, right? If a party wins a majority in both houses and it's a gigantic majority, then you might be able to see that there are some changes. Okay. A lot of these changes have also happened at really crucial parts of United States history. The first 10, right when the country was founded. 13, 14, and 15, Civil War amendments. So they tend to come in bunches. Those are just two examples, but they tend to come in bunches for the amendments. All right, so let's check out the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. There are 27 right now. I'm recording this in 2018. There are 27 amendments to the Constitution. First one, I'm sure you're aware of, freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. Second one, love the picture. I always have in my mind bear arms. So if you just want to think of a bear for the Second Amendment, that would be a good thing to do. Third Amendment is quartering troops, the quartering of troops. Military personnel can't just stay in your house because they need a place to stay. We're going to do an in-depth look at what these amendments actually are. But the Third Amendment is, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Okay, so soldiers can't just stay at your house because they need a place to go. Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizure. So the police can't just break into your house without a warrant to look for evidence relating to a crime. There has to be reasonable cause for them to look in your house, your car, whatever it is, and they have to get a warrant. And if the police come into your house and find evidence relating to something, but they don't have a warrant, then they cannot use, according to the Fourth Amendment, that evidence in court. 5, I plead the fifth. Plead the fifth. You do not have to say anything that would make you say that you are guilty in a court. Okay, so you cannot incriminate yourself, or you have the right to not incriminate yourself. Yeah, pretty straightforward. The Sixth Amendment. All right, so you have to have a speedy and public trial. So you can't just be held in jail indefinitely. They have to actually give you a date for court, and you can't have a trial behind closed doors. It has to be a public trial, and it has to be relatively quickly. Seventh Amendment. This is one that people pretty much forget about because it's not a huge deal at any time, but you have to have a trial by jury for civil court cases that are more than $20. So I'll read the amendment's official language. This is, by the way, in your reader if you want to follow along. In suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall otherwise re-examine in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Okay, so civil, you get a civil trial for Amendment 7. Amendment 8, bail and punishment. This is no cruel and unusual punishment in jail. So you can't charge someone a ton of money for a crime if it was just like a petty crime for bail, and you can't torture someone, you can't use unsavory methods of getting information while people are in jail. Amendment 9. Interesting one. Amendment 9 really opens this up. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So these are not the only things that these are not the only rights, these are not the only entitlements that you have as a United States citizen. And Amendment 10, Amendment X, if you want to get Roman numerally on it. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Okay, so reserved powers. So anything that's not listed in the Constitution are up to the states to decide, which is why we have different laws in different states for certain things. So that's pretty much where we are. That's the Bill of Rights. You should know what the Bill of Rights, what amendments the Bill of Rights corresponds to. You should have a pretty good idea about each individual amendment and what they mean. So these are the 10 First Amendments out of the 27 that have been enacted so far. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great day, everybody. See ya.